This week in On the Go, we get the big picture from the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority.
It's about transit, it's about highways, it's about local streets. And if your population is going to grow by 50%, you're going to need to grow everything.
Hello and welcome to On the Go, the T-Barta podcast, where we talk all things related to transit and transportation. Today we're learning more about the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority with CEO Joe Waggoner and Bob Fry, the authority's Planning and Innovation Director. Gentlemen, thanks for taking time to talk today.
Thank you.
Thank you, no problem.
Before we get into your many projects, a little background on our guest. Joe Waggoner is originally from Maryland, but like many of us, he moved south and has grown to love the Florida lifestyle. He was formerly Chief of Planning and Development at the Maryland Transportation Authority, moving to the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority in 2007 as CEO. In that role, he oversees all administrative, financial, and planning duties for the public toll agencies, projects, and programs. So Joe, right out of the gate, you wouldn't have spent a career in transportation if it was not rewarding. What is it about this work that you find most enjoyable?
So I've worked for public agencies for 40 years that provide transportation as a service. I started actually with a county agency back in Baltimore County. And when I saw the scale of construction projects, and they were hundreds of millions of dollars, I was just awed, because before then I was, I came from a blue collar family, and anything that spent more than, a couple $1,000s was just unimaginable. So when I saw the scope of construction projects and as I talk about how all these systems interlock with each other, it's amazing to see that. And I've been fascinated with that my whole life. If you get a chance to tour one of these construction projects, like the Selmon Extension, just drive down there. Nobody appreciates the amount of expertise and thought that goes into creating that. There are literally tens of millions of dollars of construction components buried in the ground that you never see, that you don't know is there, that are an essential element of building that thing up out of the ground. And knowing how that all connects and how that all feeds and intertwines with the rest of your transportation systems and being able to work in that arena is just fascinating beyond anything you can explain to the average person. So I've worked for agencies providing transportation services as a public good for 40 plus years. I've always been fascinated by the scale, scope, and linkage of our public transportation systems and services. Together, roads, transit, airports, and ports are the foundation of our economy. For the last 20 years, I have been in the tolling business, and I enjoy it because it is the closest public transportation service to the private sector business model that I know of. We're funded from user fees based on a customer choice. We build, maintain, and operate our own systems from our toll revenues. Keeping our customers happy is essential for our business.
Thanks, Joe. That's quite a commitment and very well said. Now let's learn a little more about Bob. Director of Planning and Innovation, Bob Fry has more than 28 years of planning and operations experience working throughout Florida and the United States. He is THEA's project manager on the Connected Vehicle Project and coordinates THEA's innovation initiatives at the federal, state, and local levels. Bob, I will ask you the same question. What is it about your work that you find most enjoyable and rewarding?
I've always been interested in transportation. I've always found that transportation, especially within city and urban areas, is the lifeblood of a society. That's where it's made for people to come together and be dynamic. So I've always felt that. Even my grandfather drove the subway system in New York. They got pictures of me at 4 years old sitting on his lap. So I've always been interested in that. I got involved in transportation as a career because it's someplace where we actually can make a difference economically, socially, personally, in every aspect of somebody's life. And I really believe that having those options on how to get somewhere and how to move your family forward is important. I fell in love with the tolling industry, just like as Joe said, because here we're about as close to the private sector as you can get in government, and it's all user fee based. That means there's a demand there that we have to meet, and anything we plan and build and we plan, we build. So I really love that we're able to do that, and that it fits complementary with all the other aspects of a city, of what the city will do, the county, FDOT, HART, TBARTA, all these different agencies. We basically fit into a unique place. So I love how can we all go forward?
No, that's very well said. We have an impact on so many lives, helping to improve how people connect and achieve the American dreams. Let's talk about the authority itself. Anyone who is new to the Tampa region, as I was myself years back, sees we have a lot of transit and transportation organizations. There's FDOT, our MPOs, transit agencies and authorities, TBARTA, and then you have THEA. For someone who's not familiar with how things work, how will you explain why there's a Tampa Hillsborough County Expressway Authority, and what are your specific responsibilities?
So among the other things we've talked about, I've provided you with, our agency's reason for existence, which is to finance future revenue streams to build transportation systems today, rather than wait until you have the money in hand to build them. And I talked about how the advantages you get to make use of them and the development can happen while you're paying for them. By way of example, what is the Selmon providing today to our community? Today, over 200,000 trips a day are made on the Selmon Expressway. Over the course of a year, 60 million trips in and out of the central business district of the city of Tampa are provided via the Selmon Expressway. Throughout that whole quarter, the 15 miles, even before we build this extension, you had billions of dollars of economic and residential developing happening in that corridor. And the Selmon was their primary means of regional access. And if I just look in the last 5 years, you look out to the US 301 interchange area, hundreds of millions of dollars. You have Bass Pro Shops, you have TGH emergency care hospital just developed out there. You have a Coke development that's getting ready to go in on 301 at the right next to our roadway. That's going to be in excess of 300 million. You follow that into the downtown area. You have Water Street, which will rely on the Selmon as its primary means of regional access to the interstates and to points, across the bay. That development is $3 billion, millions of square feet of office space and commercial space, and thousands of residential units. If you go out to the West End, where we're completing the Selmon extension, there's over $800 billion worth of new development, residential and commercial, happening out there today, and more being planned. So I look at the quarter and I see a quarter of prosperity for the community. And that's what any regional transportation facility should provide and does provide. As we look forward, just in our county, we're projecting 50% growth. And you heard Bob and I would tell you that it's not about any one part of the transportation system, it's transportation as a whole. So it's about transit, it's about highways, it's about local streets. And if your population is going to grow by 50%, you're going to need to grow everything. I would love to see an audacious goal by our transit agencies to increase ridership by 3 times or 4 times in the next 20 years. That would be an awesome goal to set and be able to accomplish. But what you have to know is that with 50% population growth, if you could triple your transit ridership, still 90% of that growth would not be addressed. They would still be looking to use vehicles to get where they want to go. We can hope that technology helps us address that, and it will help. But with 90% of your growth to be addressed, you're going to need roads too. And we still remain a viable option to provide that service going forward. And we're interested in working in partnership with the other transportation agencies out there. We even have a toll concept we call transit flex lanes that would put a transit agency, so to speak, in the driver's seat of a toll facility to run a managed lane where the buses have the priority treatment to make sure they provide fast, reliable service and take advantage of a toll revenue stream to pay for that service. So we're here to partner and work with everybody in the future to address our transportation needs.
You are called the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority, but maybe not for long. Tell us about the move in the Florida legislature right now to rename THEA as the West Florida Expressway Authority and expand your authority as well.
So in 2014, our legislation was changed to enable us to actually develop projects in counties adjacent to Hillsborough County with the permission of those counties. It basically is set up so that if the county wants us to come do a project there and my board agrees to it, we can do that today. But in our conversations with the county commissioner boards, one of their key questions was, will this give us a seat on the board's authority? Because that's how we're governed. We're governed by a board of 7 members. And my answer to that was always no, there's no clear path for that to happen. So what this really does is it still allows us by invitation, the new language, to come do a project in their county, but it provides a pathway by which if we agree to do a project with them, by that we, I mean our board agrees to do a project that the county has asked us to do, they would gain a new seat on our board. So our board of 7 would grow by 1 county commissioner appointed by that county commission added to our board. So our board could grow up to a maximum level of about 13 members per the legislation. I don't see that happening quickly. It's just providing a clear path for how we're there as a regional option to advance those same transportation needs I just talked about earlier. Get it done sooner and meet your needs rather than wait until some future day when you can build it with all cash up front.
So you've always had regional responsibility, but now it appears even more so. Local planning and, as you mentioned, implementation, which is your responsibility, critical, of course, at the local level. But as we've seen, regional coordination in planning and implementation is increasingly important in a lot of metropolitan areas like ours across the United States. Why is a regional approach also important to Tampa Bay's transportation future?
Okay, I'm going to reiterate one more time that we are an implementing agency, not a planning agency.
Correct.
And the way it works, the way I see it working and the way it works, in fact, is each county and city staff plan for their needs. And those plans are assimilated at the county level by an MPO. And then those MPOs coordinate at the regional level. That's how it's set up here where we live in this part of Florida. It's very different in other states, but that's how it works here. So we don't do the planning at the regional level. We look at the regional plans, and if those counties or those cities ask us to see if there is a toll viable solution to advance one of those projects, that's what we're here for. We're here as another method of building, maintaining, and operating a transportation asset for anyone who wants to make use of it. I will say that, when we own a facility, as with any owner of a facility, whether it's a transit agency or a port or an airport or a county, we of course do our own planning for our own facility. And we make sure that we're always able to looking forward to meet the future demands of our service and our customers.
You talked about funding a little bit. Obviously, we know there's toll revenue, but just let me touch on that again. So is all of your funding through toll revenue? You're self-sustaining that way?
Absolutely. Toll revenues pay for 100% of our operations, maintenance, and administration, and our system preservation. Beyond that, in our work program, we always are open to compete for federal funds, and our connected vehicle pilot project is a great example, and Bob will talk about that more later, I'm sure. But if you look at our current 10-year work program, which is about $1 billion, more than 98% of that is toll-based cash or toll-based bond financing when we look to see how we're going to build this out. And that's all built on the basis of the tolls that we collect from our user fees, our customers every day. Our facility is strictly, you only pay for it if you use it. Otherwise, nobody else is paying for it. We don't get any other tax revenues from the state, city, or county level to do anything we do. We again get back to that private business model. You get paid for the service you provide. If your customers don't use you, you don't make any money off of it.
Well, as you mentioned, you only pay for it if you use it. As we know, during the pandemic, less people were using toll roads and less people were traveling. How has the pandemic impacted toll revenue, and how are you adjusting? Well,
you might guess, or maybe you wouldn't, but when you have one source of funds, you tend to budget in a fiscally conservative manner, especially when your primary business is dependent on the bond market. The bond markets are our bankers. And the best way for people to understand that relationship is if you were to buy a house or you were to go to a developer and say you wanted to have a house built for you, you go to a bank. And what the bank looks for is, what does your future revenue stream look like? What do you do for a living? How much money are you going to make? What are your expenses? And then they make a line and say, well, you have this much money left over on a monthly basis to pay a loan that I'll give you a mortgage to build your house with. It works just like that. So we've got one source of funds, just like you have a job and your income, and we budget in a conservative manner. We think we are able to withstand the pandemic downturn that is hitting us right now. We know we have. We've been able to meet all of our obligations for operations, maintenance, and administrative. Very critically, we're able to make all of our debt service payments and meet key performance indicators that the bond market has set out there. The bond market is the lifeblood of a toll concept. If you can't meet those, you really don't have a reason to exist, because you're always looking to build based on a future revenue stream and present value of that revenue stream by way of selling bonds. So we're in good shape. We think we're going to be able to do everything we said we were going to do in basically the same time frame as existed before the pandemic. But I will say we did take advantage of the pandemic in some ways. We had construction underway that we gave more time to the contractors to accelerate the construction. Traffic was down, so we allowed more lane closure, which allowed them to build the projects faster. The bond market actually became very strong for investment because no money was being made everywhere else. The rates in the bond market went down. So we refinanced over $200 million in our current bonds for a present value of savings in excess of $30 million. And as an agency, we continued pumping out work. Over the last year, we've put out more than $40 million of new work since the pandemic started, which we saw as a great way to help keep our economic vitality strong and keep it rolling. The more work we can push out there, the better. We're a small agency. We have about 25 staff. We outsource all of our planning, all of our engineering. I like to say we have just enough internal managers to manage the work that we do, and then we outsource all the other efforts we put out there, especially for construction. So we're in good shape, and we're looking forward to continued prosperity of the region once we come out of this pandemic.
Well, that's good news indeed. Glad to hear it. Let's take a minute to talk about tolls from the perspective of drivers. Of course, the days of the toll booth are behind us. You've long since moved to SunPass collections, where a transponder seamlessly deducts tolls from an online account. But you also provide toll by plate options for those who don't have SunPass. How many drivers are on SunPass as opposed to toll by plate? What's happening there?
So about 75 to 80% of our users are SunPass customers, and about 20 to 25% are toll by plate. We actually converted our system back in 2010 to all electronic tolling. We were the first in the state and one of the first in the country to go all electronic tolling. That had a lot of positive benefits. At the top of the list is it made the roads safer because you took the stop and go at a toll plaza out of the mix. There are a lot of fender benders we had at our tolling points because of that. It made it greener because taking that same stop and go out reduced carbon emissions. We estimate we reduced carbon emissions by about 50 tons per year by just taking the stop and go out, because the enemy of the environment to a large degree when you talk about highways is congestion. The more you keep the traffic flowing freely, the less air quality impacts you have. And that's true whether it's CO2 emissions or particulate matter emissions. So staying ahead of that curve is beneficial in many ways. And lastly, we actually increased the capacity of the roadway by removing that stop point in the middle of the road where we had our main toll gantries. We created more throughput capacity. So we're able to serve more customers as well. So it was all positive. I'll even say that we reduced our operating costs because managing a toll by plate system is much cheaper for us than having people out there collecting cash in the lanes. So we saved money there as well. There was more risk because I like to tell people, imagine you opened a convenience store and you wanted to go a version of all electronic for that convenience store. You basically have cameras and you have a credit card machine. Some of your customers come in, they pick up their merchandise, they scan it, and then they swipe their credit card to pay for it as they leave the building. But 20 to 25% of your customers are going to walk in, take stuff off the shelf. You're going to take their picture and they're going to leave. Well, then you got to go look them up on Facebook or some other means to find out where their mailing address is. And then you send them a bill in the mail and pay for it. Would you like to enter into that kind of business proposition with me? There was risk with it, but we found the risks to be well worth those benefits I outlined earlier of safer, greener, and actually increased capacity throughput.
And I hadn't even considered the green aspect of that, but that makes certainly a lot of sense. The more efficient you are on the highways, the less time you're there, the less emissions there are. So all good points there. You've done a lot of innovation so far. What's next regarding tolling? Are there any future innovations in the works or that you foresee that may change the way we get tolled in the future?
As the community may know or may not know, maybe this is a good way to help get the word out. We're very interested in the future. We're very interested in what we call ACEs, or automated, connected, electric, and shared future of transportation. And it's not just for highways, it's for transit, it's for everything transportation related. We envision in the future where automobiles, as they become more digital, will have built-in systems that enable you to pay your tolls without having a transponder sticking on your window, without us taking an image of your license plate and you looking it up. That's still, a good 20 years away till the cars become that automated, and frankly, it becomes a function of how many of them you can get into the fleet. Vehicles are made so good today that their duration means it takes, decades to turn over a fleet. When I was a kid, my father had a car that lasted 3 years and was regular for a junkyard. Now your car will go 100, 200,000 miles and you can still resale it to buy your next car. So they're in the market for a much longer time now. But we see that coming in the future. You'll be able to pay your tolls. You'll be able to go to a drive-through restaurant, window and pay for your food purchases there. All things are going to be possible in the future. Our key focus is going to be, though, when you talk to Bob about our connected vehicle pilot project, our focus is safety, which is what we care about first and foremost in anything we do. And then it's also about service capacity. And we see all those things having very positive benefit from ACEs of the future.
Of course, anyone who drives West Shore down to the Gandy has seen all the work you were doing on the Selmon Expressway, the extension project. I would like to start with a little history about the expressway's namesake. Of course, Roy Selmon had a Hall of Fame career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He continued his work in our community after his playing days were over, including time as athletic director at USF. How did the expressway come to be known as the Selmon, and how does THEA continue to honor Mr. Selmon's legacy today?
So the roadway was renamed the Selmon Expressway by the legislature shortly after his playing career with the Bucks. And we personally, Sue and I and others at the agency got to know Leroy when we were doing that conversion to all electronic tolling. We asked him to come, help us, put the word out there that the business model was going to change for how you pay your tolls. And he gave very freely of his time. He was a gentleman. He was all about the best things that you'd expect from any human being. So we asked him, what can we do for you? He didn't want money. He just said, find a way to get back to the community, especially in education. So we took on some things in his name. One of the things we do is we started sponsoring a bridge building competition at the middle school and high school level. We do that with University of South Florida. It's a really neat program where we give kits to high schools and middle schools, and teams of kids get together and they try to come up with creative bridge designs. They bring them over to USF, and in a competitive program, we smash them. We load them up with so much weight that they break, and then we give awards out. So it's a lot of fun, and we get hundreds of people coming for that every year. But on top of that, we do what we call a Selmon STEM program with USF. We offer book scholarships for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors at USF for those who are into the STEM educational programs like engineering. And we go another step further. We offer internship programs for students at the junior and senior level. And so far and they're paid internships, and we pay well to come work in our office for us so they can see what the real world is like when you get into an engineering and planning environment. We put about 22 kids through our program. This year we had to go on hold because of the pandemic, but we're going to reopen that process. We've, like I said, at least 22 kids put through it. We even hired one of those students as an engineer for us, and she's doing outstanding work. So we now have a full-time engineer that was a result of helping her work her way through school and getting into the business that we love so much together.
Let's move on to all that construction along the Gandy, the Selmon Extension project. The transformation there has been tremendous. Tell us about that project. Why was it undertaken, and how do we benefit?
For a decade or more, the Gandy Boulevard from Dale Mabry down to the Gandy bridges was congested, and still is. If the pandemic wasn't here, it'd be just as bad or worse than ever. Was very congested in AM and PM, or morning and afternoon peak hour travel times. And that's because you had local traffic competing with regional traffic. And that truly is regional traffic, because when we looked at our traffic studies, people think they make the assumption that, well, it's all people coming from Pinellas to work at Hillsborough County. Well, it's not. The traffic flow down there is not directional. It's evenly balanced. There's many people going from Hillsborough County to work in Pinellas as there are coming from Pinellas to work in Hillsborough every day and using that corridor. So we had to come up with a solution that provided travel in both directions during the PM and AM timeframes. And we came up with a solution that separated the traffic. We separated the regional traffic from the local traffic by building an elevated facility down the existing median of the roadway that pulled all that regional traffic out of the local corridor, making the traffic flow better for those who live and work in that local area, and gave a very clear path, a much improved path in terms of time to those who are going to come across the bridge, go to the bridge every morning and evening to their jobs. It's a great solution. It didn't take a single driveway of any business along the community, didn't take a single parcel anywhere. All the turning movements that were there before and after the projects are going to be, the project is done, will be the same. So all the access is there. The design of the project was key to us. We wanted to minimize impacts to the existing commercial establishments and to the visual side. So we actually elevated that structure twice as high as you would see for a typical bridge. It's 30-foot high at the bottom point. We reduced the number of piers by 30% by increasing the span length from a typical 140 to 200-foot length. That was all about raising that mass up out of the visual line of sight for the community as you're driving either way or walking either way on Gandy Boulevard below. But it was also about, maintaining all those turning points, maintaining all those driveway accesses that you did, that were there before you came in. We think it's been a great project. We think it's going to provide well for our community, both at the local and the regional level in the future going forward.
Now, as we record this in March of 2021, I understand the project is wrapping up. So where are we on the timeline?
Yeah, we're looking for the third week of April to do a ribbon cutting and open it for use.
Great. We're looking forward to that. And I'd encourage anybody who hasn't driven out there in a while to go take a look, because it is certainly very impressive. You talked about the business aspect of this and some of the engineering accomplishments along the way. I know that you integrated this project along with the existing business district there. You already touched on that a little bit, but I think you're to be commended the way that you were responsive to the business community. Tell us about that process a little bit, and how you made sure that this project did not get in the way of business in any way, allowed folks who continue to do business there to continue to prosper.
We have a great public relations and communications team that help us develop our projects and help us, at the planning level as well as the implementation side when you're actually building. It's all about communication and commitments, making the commitments to retain the access to those businesses, making the commitments to provide an open line of communication before you did the project and while the project is under construction. We held monthly meetings with the business groups down there and any business owner who wanted to come see us. Every month we did that before we started, and we offered it every month while the construction was there. We provided an on-site office they could walk into at any time and talk to us about a concern they might have with construction. Keeping those commitments during construction, off-peak hours. During peak hours, there are going to be 2 lanes in each direction open at all time, so that they were able to, people could get to their facility. And doing construction, minimizing the detours, minimizing the lane closures, and sticking to that and meeting those commitments it's all about key. That's why we think we've been fortunate, but it's more than fortunate when you actually put the effort into it. That's why we think we've gotten the results that we have with the business community down there and addressing their concerns. We even sponsored a Shop Gandy campaign, started before the construction, and it still runs, where we encourage people to go shop in the Gandy vicinity for their needs. We do it on our website, and we help them with the South Tampa Chamber of Commerce run their Shop Gandy program as well. So it's about communication and commitments. If you can do those two things well, I think your chance of success is much better.
Before we move on, I want to ask about reversible express lanes on the Selmon. For those who are not familiar, tell us what those are and how those work.
The reversible express lanes, if you've driven them or if you haven't, it's an elevated highway solution that might look like the work we're doing down at the West Selmon extension down to the Gandy Bridge, but it's a very different application. It's reversible because on the east side of our highway, traffic is very directional. What I mean by that is in the morning, everything's coming from the east, driving to the west. They're either driving to downtown Tampa or they're going past downtown Tampa to points west. That could be MacDill Air Force Base, or it could be all the way over to Pinellas County. What we had there was a heavy directional flow that we didn't have the right of way to address. I couldn't build 5 lanes in each direction, right? I had 2 existing, but I could build a 3-lane elevated section in the existing median that on a directional basis in the morning, I had 5 lanes coming in to the west, and in the evening, I could have 5 lanes going out to the east. And so that, as you could understand, for a directional demand, more than double the capacity. And it's been very successful. We're actually planning on methods to enhance how the REL can be used. Right now, you can get on the REL at Brandon, I-75, or from 301. All right, you can get in the REL and come in and get off at Twig Street right downtown. But if you wanted to continue a through trip on the Selmon to go to other points in the central business district of Tampa or to go further west, that option wasn't there. You had to get off downtown and find another ramp to take you back on the Selmon. We're going to be building a new ramp just past the I-4 connector at the Selmon so that in the morning, westbound traffic will be able to get on the REL from Brandon, I-75 or US 301, take the REL down past the I-4 connector and get back onto what we call the lower lanes of the Selmon Expressway and take that to any point further west. It will be able to take you to Tampa General Hospital, getting off just after the river, or take you over to get down to MacDill Air Force Base, or take you nonstop all the way from Brandon, I-75, all the way to Pinellas County, and using the REL to do that. That's probably more than you wanted to know about the REL, but that's what it's all about.
No, it's very interesting and very important. So what's the timeline on that project that you just mentioned? Is that already in the works?
It is in the works. And part of that financing I told you about that we took advantage of. We actually, while we saved $30 million in a reissue, we also managed, along with the savings, got $20 million more in capital to help us build that ramp, because we're building one other ramp that gives you another option when you come off of I-75 to get on to the Selmon going, again, westbound. You can get on it sooner, but that critical one is where you can get off of the REL westbound and get back onto the Selmon lower lanes. And that's coming this spring or summer. We're going to be awarding that contract as a design build.
Very good. Well, the Selmon extension project may be wrapping up, but there are other expansion projects for the Selmon. When we come back, we'll talk about that and other THEA projects. You are listening to On the Go, the Transit and Transportation podcast from the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority.
As Tampa Bay gets back to work, morning and evening commuters are also starting to crowd back onto local roads. Maybe you've been teleworking and aren't ready to restart the rush hour grind. If so, Commute Tampa Bay can help. Go to CommuteTampaBay.com and find out how someone else can drive you to work in a T-BARTA van pool. You'll avoid the aggravation of driving, make new friends, help the environment, and save up to thousands of dollars each year. Commute Tampa Bay. It's the smarter way to work.
Welcome back to On the Go, the THEA podcast. We're talking with Joe Waggoner and Bob Fry from the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. When we left, we were talking about the Selmon Extension, a project that is in the final stages. But expansion of the Selmon does not necessarily stop there. Also in the works is a project development and environmental study looking to add capacity to existing Selmon right-of-way between Himes and Whiting Street. Bob, tell us a little bit about that project. What is the goal here?
The goal of the system is to operate it in the safest, most efficient means possible. And right now we are taking the first steps towards looking at the Selmon South, as we call it, from Himes to Whiting, to see when will the traffic be reaching a point that we need to do improvements, what improvements are necessary, and then coming up with a schedule to do that. We follow the state of Florida Department of Transportation's process. So everything we do is consistent with what you'll see out on other roadways and state roadways. The nice thing about the PD&E process, as project development and environmental, is that we look at a whole gamut of different things, from traffic to environmental to cultural to community and public involvement. So we're making sure we're taking in a full picture of what the area is, what's needed, and how we can best meet that need and meet the community's needs as well.
In a PD&E like this, you often come up with several alternatives for design, as you just mentioned. Where are you in that process? Is there now a preferred alternative?
Yes, we've actually reached preferred alternative. We started with 5, and we narrowed it down, and then we added an additional, which totally gave us a total of 6. And now we've reached a preferred alternative, which will allow us to widen the Selmon to 6 lanes, one more additional lane in each direction to the outside, add noise barriers throughout the whole corridor, as well as make improvements, the ramps, to help accomplish Vision Zero and pedestrian bicycle improvements. And also we have some drainage that we're working with the city on how do we make the drainage situation better in that area. So that's what the alternative would come up with. And then we're looking at 2034, 2035 timeframe, when the traffic projects to be high enough to look at that additional 4 lanes in each direction. But we probably will be looking at that at, I would say, 2032 is the time frame that we're looking at. So the nice thing about this project is it not only provides more capacity to help move people in and out of Tampa, but also to help the local communities deal with some of their problems. That's one of the things I really enjoy about working in this industry and working for the toll authority is we like to leave corridors better than when we found them, and we try to find the improvements that we can do that will help. We are filling in sidewalk gaps, creating retention walls, adding signals. There'll be no more free flows off of the ramp so that pedestrians and bicycles are safer and can move through on the signal control, making it safer. Aesthetics underneath the overpasses to make sure that they fit the community and what the community wants. So there's a lot of complementary pieces on this that basically when we're finished, the area will be much better than when we found it.
You have a long-term vision and a lot of options to prepare for what the future may hold for us, which is wise. Now that you have that preferred alternative, what's the next step in this process? Is the PD&E wrapping up, or where do we go from here in the next year or so?
We're finalizing the documentation. We're adding the last piece to the PD&E, which is the community public input section. We had our public hearing about 3 weeks ago. So those comments, which ended March 8th, will now be incorporated into the final document. And when we have the final document, it will go to our board for acceptance that we've followed the proper rules, regulations. And ultimately, the last step is we send it to the Planning Commission for review. At that point, the PD&E is done. FDOT gets a copy, we have a copy, and then we'll move forward from there based on what our board and executive director want and how it fits into our work program. So this is just the first step to figuring out how this all goes together and moving it forward to actually becoming a project.
The authority is most often associated with the Selmon, as we've discussed, but that's just one of 4 Hillsborough facilities listed on your website. Can you briefly talk about the other ones?
Sure. The one that I like to talk about a lot, that's my first project when I came here to the Expressway Authority, was building the Selmon Greenway, which basically connects from the convention center down at Ashley all the way to Ybor City on 19th Street. That is a bike pedestrian 15-foot mobility trail that we built, and we've improved it as we've gone along. Now we have the Cottvilla Dog Park that's on it. We've added artwork. We've also now have improved certain areas with the Roy Selmon statue over by camels. And we'll be coming forward to our board within the next couple of months with the next section that we'll be looking at, which will be go from Florida over to Jefferson to improve. So when I talked earlier about mobility options, this is us actually walking the walk as well. We're not just a toll authority. We're providing these types of facilities for people to have other options in how to get downtown. And we've maintained a commitment from our initial grant application with the Riverwalk that we will maintain it as a mobility trail, which to me is much more, it's a different animal than a recreational trail. We don't have workout places on there and things like that. This is transportation to move people.
Now, as we've noted before, you're project manager for the Connected Vehicle Program. That's very exciting. Tell us about that. What is it, and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Well, the first phase in 2015, we were awarded one of 3 connected vehicle pilot sites in the United States. And what that basically meant was that we put, and I love the creative titles of these, we put roadside units out, RSUs, that are part of the infrastructure that the Expressway Authority maintains and operates, and then installed onboard units in the vehicles for over 1,000 vehicles for people to use the reversible lanes and coming into Meridian. And we basically given them safety warnings. And there are things such as wrong way entry on a ramp, end of ramp deceleration. So when you're coming in at higher speed and the queue is moving back, you'll know it. And we warn them at certain points when they need to lower their speed. Forward collision warning. Those types to make drivers basically give them the best information that they can have to make the best decisions. We were not an automated project, which means the vehicle did not take control. The driver still maintained control throughout the whole project on this. And what was really interesting about this was we were interested in the transition area from the limited access facility into an urban environment, like you'll see down as Meridian goes into the Channel District. We also worked with HART, where we outfitted 10 buses and we outfitted 9 streetcars as well. So we had that. And there's also a pedestrian aspect of this that we did over by the courthouse to try to warn vehicles of when pedestrians were entering into a crosswalk. Some of these mid-block crossings, you'll notice people randomly enter in and then you get a flash and signal to stop. Well, we took it one step further where we put the information in the vehicle further upstream so they knew that there was a pedestrian coming. What we're most proud of in this project was that we completed it on time, on budget, and we actually generated data, and we're generating data right now for the U.S. Department of Transportation, and it's going and being analyzed to be used federally on what happens throughout the nation. So I think that THEA and Tampa being able to take a part in creating those rules for the future is sort of a cool thing.
That is pretty cool. Absolutely. Now, are you looking for volunteers to participate in this program?
Yes, actually we are. We were successful enough that we were awarded an additional grant to go from the next phase, which we're calling CV4, which is the phase 4 portion of this project. And that's interesting because we are bringing in auto manufacturers. Honda, Toyota, and Hyundai all are taking part with us and will be putting the same type of onboard units in their vehicles that you will get when you buy a car. And then we'll have another 400 that we'll be doing as retrofits to just any make or model that wants to take part. Moving forward with that, we'll be looking for volunteers, about 575 to 600 of them, and they will get a toll discount as part of this, which is we was very successful in the first round. So they'll definitely be able to take part. They'll be able to knock a little bit off their toll bill and actually provide to the database that's being used nationally and internationally for connected vehicle technology and how we move it forward.
Excellent. So anyone who hears this and says, I want to learn more about this, maybe sign up, what would you advise them to do? Where should they go?
They should go to our website, follow that under the programs and activities that we have, and then from there, it will take them. Also, if they contact the Expressway Authority and leave their name and their email address, we can then send them an email and get them signed up and see if their vehicle works and if we move forward with them.
Very good. Now, I know you've been speaking with our principal planner, Brian Passero. TBART has been in discussion on a pilot project to explore some automated technology on buses. Can you tell us what's in discussion about that?
As we talked about earlier, working with mobility options, how do we give people the most options for to manage their transportation? We were working with hard on bus rapid transit, basically from running it from Brandon into downtown and beyond. HART has had good luck with us using our system. Those routes have performed fairly well, and we're looking forward to working with them, helping them incorporate an automated type of bus if we go forward with this. And from our perspective, how do buses and vehicles share the same corridor that actually help each other? We're able to move transit through and create better headways, and at the same time helping us at the signals with the transit priority of moving cars through and not having to wait as long. I look at it as tolls and transit as the peanut butter and chocolate mix, that it goes really well together if we can figure out how to move forward. I just want to quantify there that this project right now is conceptual and has not gone to either of our boards. So I don't want people to, but it indicates the type of technologies we're looking at going forward and what we can do to see how we can make things better in the corridor and meet different needs.
Certainly, it's conceptual, but I think it goes to a very good point that we're all working together. We're connected. You're connected with HART and other agencies, the MPOs, just as TBART is too. And so it's great to see that collaboration throughout the region too. And certainly we want to support you in that mission. There's a lot going on with automation these days. And how does that impact your work? What considerations do you need to make for preparing on the way we're going to drive or be driven, as it may be, in the decades ahead, when a lot of that technology isn't here yet?
Automation is coming. Right now, automated features are available in most vehicles. Now, taking the jump to full automation, they're finding is much more difficult than what originally they thought, especially in an urban environment. Some of the areas that we're looking at on automation is how can we use the infrastructure to help automation lower, for lack of a better word, lower the workload. So if we can use our RSUs that are around the corridors and providing information to automated vehicles where they don't have to do the heavy lift, where we're able to help them with mapping and where they're at and what's coming up in advance, rather than having to rely on sensors, can that make it come about sooner and easier on the technology? As a toll road automation, basically it's a trip. A trip is a trip. So these are still trips that need to be made. These are still people who are making trips for a specific reason in their lives. So whether or not they're automated or the driver, it's still the same priority: safety first, efficiency, and making sure that we're getting them where they need to go in the best trip possible.
Well, Bob and Joe, I'm going to leave it at that. We've covered a lot of ground here today. I want to thank you for this conversation. It's been very educational for me, and I hope for our listeners as well. Our guests have been Joe Waggoner and Bob Fry with the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. And thank you for listening. This has been On the Go, the podcast from TBARTA, the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority.